Welcome to Quick Sidebar, where we talk about anything and everything and get distracted often. I'm Jake, this is
Dan,
and
Bradley.
Today, let's discuss villains. I'm talking villains in movies, villains in TV shows. What makes a good villain? Bradley, start us off.
All right. Well, if I remember correctly, last episode we were talking about whether or not a good villain is pure evil or somebody that you can relate to. And, well, here's the thing. I think that, like, if we're talking, like, a horror movie, like, let's say, like, you know, Freddy Krueger or Mike Myers.
Jason.
Not Mike Myers, Michael Myers. Mike Myers is somebody else.
He's a completely different villain.
We know who you're talking about.
If it's, like, a horror movie like that, then I almost feel like it should be pure evil. Because
But I'm talking about a good villain.
No, right, okay.
Like a good villain.
Yeah. I mean, like, if it's... I feel like, to some degree, there has to be motivation behind what they're doing. And in order for there to be motivation, you have to be able to somewhat... There has to be some sort of human emotion attached to why they're doing what they're doing, which then delegates why... What basically gives you a reason to somewhat relate to them and understand why they're doing what they're doing. Otherwise, it's not a good character because, like, as an actor, I think we can all agree that if we're given a character where it's like you have no motivation, you're just evil, then you're just going to be like, well, you're a terrible director.
Yes, you are awful at directing.
Right, and so, like, if it's, like, a monster or, like, a creature or, like, something like that, then I don't necessarily feel like it needs to because... it's just a different category.
I mean, even if you look at like Jason or Freddy or, well, those two ring a bell specifically because they both did come from paths of like being wrong. Like Jason was handicapped and they killed him. They threw him in the lake. They were mean to him because he was deformed, whatever. And Freddy was, what was the story? He was like a pedophile or something, and like the parents around the town like trapped him in a warehouse and burned him alive. Which is, while that's awful that he's a pedophile, and that's not justifiable by any means. But still, he was murdered brutally in a way that ended his life, on a negative note, so to speak. So he has like revenge in his heart.
And that might have been like a bad example because I mean, like the thing that actually the horror movie I thought of when I thought of like a pure evil villain is like Lights Out. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, it's that girl who doesn't really have, like, a form. You just kind of see her, like, silhouette always.
But wasn't she upset, though? Because she'd been, like, tortured in that, like, insane asylum with, like, the lights, which is why she couldn't show up in the light.
That's fair. But, like, that's the thing, though, is, like, with villains like that, though, you look at it and... Sure, they have, like, a backstory and a reason why they're doing it, but it's not, like, really, like, the kind of backstory where you're like, oh... I get it. It's like, no, that's an absurd reaction to your troubles.
I think that what makes a good villain is someone that theoretically you should always root against the villain, but someone that rides the line between good and bad makes it harder for you to just only support the hero, only support the protagonist, and I think that just makes for better like entertainment.
Mixes it up.
Yeah, like take Avengers Infinity War for example. Like Thanos, his whole goal... He believed that he was saving...
Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it.
It's been like 3 months.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, well... Anyway.
We'll talk about that later.
Talk about what?
My lack of...
Dan not having seen Infinity War yet.
That's a whole other episode. No, I think that Thanos is convinced that he is saving the living populations in the universe. Like, he is convinced that he is doing right.
Yeah.
Granted, his doing right compared to our standards of what is right and wrong is very wrong because he's killing half of the universe. He's wiping out half of every planet. But you root for him because he's got this backstory where he lost all of his loved ones and he watched his world turn into nothing. And he's trying to prevent that for everybody else. So to see someone who is thoroughly convinced that they are doing the right thing and that they are good, I think that makes for such a more compelling and convincing character. Yeah. It makes watching someone who's pure evil, they're gonna lose, just because that's how the films are set up. Like someone who's pure evil is not going to win.
Okay, so that's like what makes a good villain as far as like thematically and in film and theater and like writing wise. But I think my stance on it last week was that a good villain, if you're looking at true villainous, they're like the Joker. I mean, yeah, he has a backstory, but you never know it, and he claims it's just to watch the world burn. Everyone has a motivation of some sort, and every villain does believe what they're doing, not necessarily is right for the world, but they think there's a justifiable reason behind it. But I'm talking about what makes someone like pure evil, like a true villain, is someone with no reason. They're just doing it just to be evil, just to be bad. And while that may not be as interesting and in depth and character development and all that, it's true, but are they not a better villain as far as being evil? And being what a villain truly is, or do they have to have some kind of like human side for you to even think of them in that light?
I feel like you have to ask the question, can you really be doing evil just for the sake of evil? Because if you're doing evil for the sake of evil, then it's like, well, why?
Well, the why is for it's
why
self-driven, but there's not always some tragic backstory, like I was burned or I was thrown in a lake.
All right, and there doesn't necessarily have to be that, but there's got to be like.
But I think there is. I don't think that type of villain exists.
Maleficent, like the original Sleeping Beauty, she's literally, if you look at the original story, if you go back even further to like the Grimm Brothers story, I think that if they wrote it, whoever wrote Sleeping Beauty, she was a character. She's literally said to come of pure evil. And what's her reasoning behind attacking Sleeping Beauty and cursing her?
Because she wants to be the most beautiful.
No, that's Snow White. I'm talking about Maleficent with the horns.
I don't think that necessarily.
She's a classic horror.
I don't think that evil is necessarily like. I don't think we have to talk about evil and motivations as separate things because, like, I feel like they're together. Like you're being evil because you have a reason to be evil.
Okay,
and whether it's like. Maybe we're getting off topic.
No, well, quick sidebar.
Maybe if we're.
I think the best way to not prove my point, but to make it more understandable is it's like sometimes there's villains who are simply bad just to fight against good. They don't have necessarily a backstory or a personal reason per se, but their goal, and to me a villain who's just fighting the good guys just because they're good, just to shake things up, just to be bad, just to kill people, just to bring the good guys down, whatever that means, makes a better villain per se than someone who's like, oh, I was tortured as a kid and now I'm coming back to avenge my whatever. So like not necessarily, I mean, I guess this is a debatable term, but not necessarily having a good reason behind it. It's more just like out of spite. Like, yeah, it's out of spite. It's simply they're good,
right?
And
it's not
I'm
like,
bad, and I'm going to be bad just to be against, just to
almost like a villain who knows that he's the villain and knows that he's being evil, versus a villain who doesn't think he's the villain and actually thinks that he's doing the right thing,
or that is just vengeful and it knows they're doing something wrong, but doing it with in the intention of I was wrong, so now I'm going to wrong. Someone without that, like someone who's just being bad to be against good. Okay, like because if you look at any demon movie, demons have zero motivation as far as like, oh, they don't want money or power. They're just being fuckers. Just and you could say if you get into the demon, if you get into that section of villains that they're fighting against God and the Creator and whatever, Jesus and stuff. Yeah. But which is a symbolism for good. So they're literally just they're the antithesis of that. They're the opposite. Mm-hmm. And I think to me that makes a good villain because if you start to give villains human sides. In some stories you need that and it works okay, but for the most part a villain should be someone that's just bad. And there's not like, oh, well, I can kind of see why he's being bad. I'd be bad too if that happened to me. It's like, no, he's just an asshole because he just wants to be the opposite of good.
Well, the only argument I have against that, and I guess maybe I'm more stuck up on like in terms of watching entertainment or watching film, any sort of performance, I'm much more compelled to watch someone who has those human characteristics because I think that just makes for a better performance, for better entertainment. And a good example is in Shakespeare, that you have in Much Ado About Nothing and then in Othello. Much Ado, I think it was Don John. He literally says he is evil just for the sake of being evil. Like he makes a point about that, and it's a comedy. Like he's a bad villain. Like he stirs up trouble, but ultimately like he doesn't win. None of his people win. It's funny. But in Othello, like Iago has this history of being reprimanded, of being sold short, and then Othello comes in, he steals his position as the commander, and then there's this deep rooted history that you see his evil, and it seems to come from a much more authentic place than I'm going to be evil for the sake of being evil, like because that's not human. I don't think that's
that's not my point. Like being human does make it more interesting to watch, but I think on the sake of quality of villainness, you don't want them to have a human, because you want to hate the villain. It's inherent to despise the villain or want to see them fail, want to see them lose. Because that's why the good guy wins, and you feel that euphoria of like, oh, we succeeded, because you live vicariously through these characters.
I would actually argue against that because I think that in a lot of ways, villains almost tend to be like, especially in our society nowadays, like the person that people are rooting for. The person that's my favorite character.
Well, it's become popular.
And it's like, like Darth Vader, obviously the coolest character. Like everyone like is like, oh, Darth Vader's super cool.
But Darth Vader
t-shirts.
has that humanistic quality about him, though, because once you learn his backstory, or even in the original trilogy when he takes his helmet off and looks at Luke, and then you're like, oh, he is a human in that scene.
And I think that the reason that we root for them is because it's like
we want to see.
It's like the villain. What the villain is doing is like it's human, and they have a reason for doing it, but it's like they're letting go, and like almost in some ways I feel like that's what we as humans want to be able to do, is just let go and do whatever the hell we want. Like at our core we kind of just want no bars, to just be able to do whatever we're feeling in the moment, especially as like an American society, just having instant gratification and like doing whatever we want in the moment, like YOLO, live in the moment kind of stuff. We see that everywhere. And villains do that because they have no bars, and they've just decided, I'm throwing my morals out the window because I want to do what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do. And there might be reasons behind that, but I think to some degree, like, we almost want to root for the villain because that's exciting and enticing to be able to, which is kind of a dark way of thinking, and that we don't really necessarily think about, but I think that's actually accurate.
I think that's why Cersei on Game of Thrones is such a fan favorite. People love watching her tear shit up. People love seeing how evil she could be.
It's the same thing as it's the don't look down syndrome, I call it. It's like if someone says not to look down, then you in turn want to look down because you want to know why they said so. It's like the villain thing, and just why us as a society, we're obsessed with murder and criminals. Like we romanticize and make criminals celebrities in this country, and I think we do that because it's almost like we want to see the bad things. We want to know that the bad things are still there. So watching Cersei or like the Joker and Batman, it's a solid one to always go back to. It's like we want to see what crazy shit are they going to do, what awful thing are they going to do now with real no purpose, or at least the purpose isn't presented right in front of you. It's something deep. Like Cersei has reasons she's the way she is in Game of Thrones. Joker has reasons he's the way he is, but they never really tell you why. Now Cersei, obviously that story's still developing. They can develop that, but for the Joker, for the most part, now I know there's origin stories about the Joker that they've added on to and that kind of thing. But in just the movies that the general populace has pretty much had access to, he has no direct reason. But there is, but you don't know. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Now that being said, now that we've talked about the technicalities of villains and we have our opinions, who do we think is the best villain? Just in general, as far as who we like, who does the coolest things, who's the most badass, the most popular, who's the best in our opinion, just pure entertainment wise, just for fun, without it putting any technicalities on it.
So I have a lot of thoughts, because me personally, I don't like choosing favorites. I like kind of just looking at everything and having different thoughts about everything.
Okay.
One of the things that comes to mind almost immediately though is The Punisher. I don't know if either of you have seen the Netflix series.
I have not.
Oh, okay.
But I'm aware who he is. And
I really liked watching that show, and that kind of ties into what I was talking about before, where he's the things that he's doing, if you look at them, they're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, he's taking justice into his own hands. He's killing people. He's torturing people, and things like that. And we could argue about that too. That's a whole other thing. But as you're watching the show, though, you're rooting for him. Mm-hmm. And when there's this one character, I'll try not to give any spoilers, but there's this one character, and at the very end of the show, and he's done a bunch of terrible stuff. He's a total asshole, and you hate him. And he finally gets his hands on him at the very end, and just messes him up. And I felt kind of guilty about the fact that I was happy when he was doing it. I was like, yes, he deserves that. Yeah, kick his butt.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the anti-hero in American pop culture has become a lot more prevalent in the last couple of years. I mean, just look at the popularity of Deadpool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before that movie even came out, that movie was already one of the top grossing films of the year at least.
Right.
You know, and that movie hadn't even come out. No matter what they had done in that first movie, people would have gone in droves to see it. Because the curiosity of seeing, first of all, the first rated R Marvel movie, sanctioned Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And at that, it wasn't some weird fan made, it wasn't some cheap knockoff that was supposed to be Deadpool. It was Deadpool, sponsored, official. So, but I think the anti-hero thing has really become, and The Punisher is a great example, or Dexter is a really popular one. If you look at any of the isolated events of what Dexter did, taking punishment to your own hands is wrong and illegal. Being a vigilante is illegal and can be wrong in some cases. But still, you watch that show Dexter and you root for him the whole time, knowing that he's a serial killer.
Yeah.
And still, he's killing people that, for the most part, yes, quote unquote, deserve to be killed. Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But won't even touch that. So, but you still like him and you still want to see him grow and you still, But I think that's become a very mainstream idea.
And so, anyway, just kind of to tie that up for my point was just, I think maybe the Punisher might be my favorite villain, quote unquote. Just because, and I guess that kind of ties into feeling for the villain and like relating almost, but because he was able throughout the process of the show, whatever they did or whatever with the writing and everything, he got me to the point where I was totally on board with his agenda.
Well, okay, so that begs the question, do anti-heroes count as villains?
I mean,
in the sense that we're talking, not really. I mean, I don't think they do.
I don't think so either.
Because, like, you wouldn't say Deadpool's a villain.
No, because
right.
I'm not familiar with the Punisher, but like Deadpool is still fighting worser people.
It's still
like
Punisher's very similar in a way.
Yeah.
He's like the serious version of Deadpool, if you will.
Okay.
He doesn't have the powers like the not being able to die and all that, but
Sure.
what he's doing, like he's accomplishing goals, he's helping people, but it's not, in the same sense as Deadpool. It's not funny.
Yeah,
it's like a serious take. It's more serious. I mean, it's still a comic book character, so it can only be as serious as they can be. But yeah.
I think I have a lot of favorites. I think that one of my favorite villains is Heath Ledger's the Joker. I think that he's just so. There's something so human about how he plays the character, and the character's so messed up, and like you'd never see it in real life. So it's this realistic surrealism.
It's like an exaggeration of a real person almost.
But you watch him and you're like, this guy is insane. Like this is I feel like I'm watching a real person. So just in terms of a performance, I love him.
Oh yeah.
I think while you guys were talking about anti-heroes, it made me think of Walter White in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've watched all of it, but down the road, I mean, he's this guy that you're rooting for, who is a drug. He makes drugs, he distributes drugs, and he kills people in the process. And like, it's hard to, because I mean, you learn to sympathize and empathize with him so much because of his cancer and his son and his family and the dynamic that they have. And then like he continues to ride the line of what is okay and what's not okay, and you continue to like root him on.
Yeah.
And then there's that point where it's like, oh, you're a bad dude. Like, you're not this. Your intention of why you started doing this is so much different than what it is now. And like, I loved watching that progression throughout all 5 seasons, which just you get to just watch him become less and less of a hero and more of a villain. And he becomes like his own antagonist, and there's all sorts of stuff like that. But so his performance in that character is incredible.
And quick sidebar, did you see the extra bit that they made when he goes back and he's Hal from Middle, and all of Breaking Bad was just a nightmare of Hal's in one night. And I to me, that's the ending for Breaking Bad. Like, that's the true ending. Is this was all just a nightmare of Hal, and because that's just and they got the original Lois. And like, it's great, but it's on YouTube.
Incredible.
I'm sure you got to check it out if you're a Breaking Bad fan. But anyway, I think I mean to say who's your favorite villain is almost like to say who's your favorite hero. I mean, to me, nowadays in pop culture, the villain is just as important as the hero now.
Totally.
I think they carry just as much weight. And it used to be everything was more hero-driven. You watch old superhero movies and old movies in general, and the villain was always, I mean, not kept mysterious. I mean, you knew about them, but it was definitely told from the hero's perspective 100%. And the villain wasn't given human characteristics. They were always just like, I'm evil. So I think now, like, your favorite villain, that really is hard to answer, but I mean, if you look at as far as acting, I would agree. Heath Ledger by far is the best villain. Most believable is literally like it could be a documentary about a crazy guy, in the future somewhere where criminals have more power in the world or whatever. But I think as far as like villain powers and their character, it's always going to be Darth Vader. I mean, what a badass. The dude can choke people in a different freaking galaxy through a Videocom chat and not even act like he's doing anything. He just fucking stands there and he's talking, and the dude starts to choke, and then he starts having a different conversation while still choking that guy a million light years away. And he has lightsaber skills, and he can just do crazy. And he has James Earl Jones's voice. automatically makes you the coolest fucker in the galaxy when you have that as your voice. And he's just ominous looking. I mean, his costume or his outfit, whatever you want to call it, was designed to be intimidating. That's why he's this like 6'7" big German guy, beefy with his Nazi-esque helmet kind of thing, and it's very, and you can't see his face. And what's weird about him is he's human because you can see him move like a human, and he's clearly a person. But they removed all his human features. You don't get to see his skin and his face, and until they revealed him in Return of the Jedi, which I think was a big mistake as far as his. I mean, I know with the character arc they were trying to like round him off, but they immediately like sissified 2.5 movies of like a badass guy. They were like, oh, he just is like green lump in a suit, like not cool, man. Yeah. But still, that being said, I still think that for me, Darth Vader is the coolest villain. He's the best because he has like the human traits where you can see where he's coming from, and he became the villain to save his wife, which ended up killing her because he became the villain. Which is like I know like the original or the newest trilogy, or I guess the middle trilogy the prequels, is thought of in kind of a negative light. But for the most part, I think the writing is okay. And I think that bit that they wrote in was really good.
I think the story's okay. I mean, I think like the dialogue.
But
in terms, how they describe and show how he became Darth Vader, I think, I
think they could have cut the no at the end. The no. I mean, if we could remake those movies, there's definite parts that would cut out. But I think we'd keep a lot of them. We would just make it better. But I think for me, he's my favorite as far as villains.
Another one of my favorites is Ramsay from Game of Thrones. Ramsay Bolton,
fucker.
He's one where like he really rides the line of just like evil just for the sake of being evil.
That's what I'm talking about.
But no, he still has reason. I think he's got some mental illness. Oh, I think for sure. I think he's a masochist for sure. But he the whole he has no identity. He's a Snow.
He's a bastard.
He's a bastard, and so he's constantly resents himself and resents his father for not being the rightful heir to his father's throne. And I mean not to justify anything that he does, but it comes from a place of I hate who I am, and I'm going to transfer that onto you. And so like with Reek. That's what he does. He transfers all of the shit that's going on in his head onto Reek. But he's one where like the dark part of me not enjoyed, but like look forward to the crazy shit that he would do.
You'd like to be shocked. You like the shock
I love to hate him. I hate him.
I think to go back to my original point of they don't have a purpose or have a reason. I guess a better way now to even tighten that up a little more is that I guess if they don't make their reasoning super apparent, like if they don't wear the reasoning on their sleeves, because it's like Ramsay Bolton, he had reason, but he didn't put my reason for being this is because I hate my father and I resent my name, and I like the Joker had his reasons too, but he did. I guess the villains that let that drive them are the ones to me that are weaker because it makes them too. It's like
that's fair. I think I agree with that in some ways because I think that like it does kind of make them weaker almost because it makes you feel like they're vulnerable.
Well, and it makes them not as interesting because if they just say, hey, I'm evil because my dad abandoned me at a bus station as a kid, so now I hate buses or whatever their villainous things are.
All right, we have full copyright on that idea.
Don't steal that idea. That's all Dan Isaac's there. I think that but if it was the same scenario, but the villain was just going around and blowing up mass transit for some reason, and you're like, well, why is he evil? Why does he attack all things that move people? And then all of a sudden you found, and all of a sudden, and you're like, well, why?
Like
and
deep films,
and he's just so mean. And then you find out that way back rooted in his life, it's because his dad left him at a bus station, and you're like, oh. Ramsey Bolton, your dad left you at a bus station. That's why you torture Theon Greyjoy.
Dude, I disagree. I mean, I think it's poor writing if you have to just show it, don't tell it. And I think that they do a good job of that in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But that makes a bad villain if they show you right too soon.
Oh, okay.
Or if they tell you too soon.
Right, but I think the ones that we've demonstrated or described so far
don't. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like Ramsey Bolton, like he never explicitly says, "I'm this way because I hate my dad. It's because I hate myself." But it's implied. He almost says it. He implies it, and so it lets you. I think basically is when when you get to fill the gaps mainly, and the villain just kind of gives you the bones of why they're the way they are, and then you get to kind of fill those gaps. Makes them a better villain.
I think that both arguments are both right. Like, I think it's not necessarily one or the other. I think you can have both, and I think it depends on what story you're telling. I think that's very important. Like with horror films, I think it's important to dehumanize the villain. Like, I mean, obviously they all have like their backstories and their reasons why they do it, and like it's fine to tell that because it's still like it never really gets you on board. You know, they're not stories that get you on board.
No, horror movies aren't. Yeah,
you need to dehumanize them because then, if there's any sort of humanity to the villain, you don't fear as much for the protagonist's life.
Exactly.
But if you take away all human characteristics, then there's no limit to what the villain can do.
Yeah,
and that's what's scary.
And that's why in serial killer slasher movies, you should never ever show the killer's face. I hate it when movies do that because it's not scary anymore. Because now it's not some psycho killer after you.
Oh, I agree.
It's that guy.
Well, and then if we're going to go down that road, I think my opinions on like showing the killer's face goes back to, if you look at like a great example that I always bring up is like the old War of the Worlds they made in like the 50s or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that movie goes on, and I mean, it's a movie from the 50s, so it's only as scary as they can be. But watching it, you never see the alien.
Yeah.
Scratch that. A better example is Signs. Uh-huh. Signs, if you remove the last 10 minutes of Signs is debatably one of the best alien movies I think I've ever seen. It's creepy, it's intriguing, you were like, well, what's going on? It's very unsettling. And I think that they show a perfect amount of the aliens when they show the one walk across the alley because it's quick and the hand in the door. And my favorite scene is when they're standing in their living room and they're looking out their windows and you can hear them running on the outside of the house and you see them past the moonlight. Oh, creepy. I get chills thinking about it because it's so unsettling to think, what if you were in a situation? What if you couldn't see the monster? But then at the end, when they show you the alien for a good amount of time and you get to really look at him, and he just looks like he's a bad, first of all, it was 2003, so it's bad CGI. And then, two, on top of that, it looked like a classic alien, but just a brown Green Man, you know?
Right.
And I think that immediately you were like, oh, okay, so this is just a Green Man alien, just colored brown and kind of tall. And then the rest of the movie immediately loses value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I almost think that those are actually separate because I think when it comes to like psycho killers and showing their face is a situation where they're trying to dehumanize it and make it more of like, you know, a monster and this unknown. But like with the aliens and like monsters and things, that's playing off the fear of the unknown, like not being able to see what's going on.
Okay, that's fair. No, that's fair.
And like,
but I think that kind of applies to the killers too, though. If you don't know that he's unknown, it's But I get what
there's certainly like
it's
some
more
crossover.
It's more of a factor in monster and alien movies for sure. Yeah, I think the second they show you, but they took that advice too far in Godzilla, awful movie. But we won't go there.
Okay, so I've got another question.
Okay,
and this takes our acting side and then combines it with being a villain, and it has to do with controversial villains. So, I don't know if you've seen 12 Years a Slave. Have you guys seen that movie?
Nope.
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't seen all of it.
So that's a good example that I like to use for, like, would you play a part of someone that is historically evil or has done things that whether you're looking at it on the screen or you know of the story is like damnable. You know, the things that they've done historically.
Like if you're playing a Nazi or something.
Right. Yeah. Like in 12 Years a Slave, Michael Fassbender does an incredible job at playing a filthy slave owner. I mean, he's just disgusting.
Yeah.
And like, I know that, I mean, I don't get the opportunity. I have not at all gotten the opportunity to really play like a terrible person or like a terrible villain. But like, is it worth it to you? Do you think that it's important? Like, would you take on a role like that disgusting slave owner?
Well, I've already played a Nazi in high school. I was a Nazi in Anne Frank. I mean, I was only on stage for like a minute and a half. But I think for me, if the movie's trying to get across a historical message or trying to remind people of our past, and even like Django, which is kind of a stylized movie and kind of artsy.
Oh, yeah.
But like, I know Leo had a problem playing Calvin Candy. He didn't want to say the N-word.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I read this thing once that Jamie Foxx and Samuel Jackson literally had to sit him down and tell him, hey, normally, yeah, you would want to stay away from the N-bomb, but we're trying to make a movie that's trying to show... And Quentin Tarantino put that word in the movie so many times to make you uncomfortable, to bring up the fact that it's still used here in America.
Right.
Obviously not as public and as hatefully, but still it's around and it has a history to it. And he was trying to show that. So yeah, I think if someone said, hey, do you want to play a slave owner or play a Nazi more in depth, to me those roles are important because they're reminding us of our past. And to me, the more you remind yourself of mistakes in the past, in a not like, oh, I made a mistake, but like, these are mistakes I've made, then hopefully future generations can watch the media, because that's how we get a lot of information. We watch shit on Netflix and YouTube. And if you see someone like that, you're going to go, oh, well, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to raise my children to be like that. Hopefully that passes down. And the idea is hopefully that becomes a relic in a sense of what not to be and where we've come from as a society or as humanity.
And I think it also is important to look at what is this movie or play or whatever trying to say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
obviously you wouldn't want to
obviously you want to make sure that it's like telling the right story and communicating the right message. But going more to what your question was, early on as an actor, for me, it was hard as like the way I was raised and everything to like even just to cuss in a scene and things like that. And I kind of had to wrestle with like doing different things in scenes and using the kind of language I'm not used to or whatever. And eventually, kind of what it boiled down to for me was, you're not playing you. It's not you doing all of this. You're playing a character. You are, it's not coming back on you. It's coming back on the character, and it shouldn't be you. And if it is you, then you're a bad actor. But
yeah, I agree. I think the key is that it has to have purpose for me. It has to have a meaning to the overall story. And the story has to have a meaning that is going to touch people, so to speak. It can't just be, we're just going to write a play or a movie about slaves and have it be like this kind of weird movie just about it, you know, and we're going to kind of make it lighthearted or where we're Nazis or whatever the topic gives a tough role. It has to have a purpose behind it. It can't just be, let's just make a movie and then just play these parts.
Yeah.
Well, and in those particular movies, I think that the most important casting and the most important character to do well is the villain.
Oh,
because,
yeah, sure.
Because like, the person who's playing it has to go 150% because
I was going to say that,
you know, because if Michael Fassbender doesn't do a good job as playing this slave owner, you don't feel the empathy that I think that the director and the creative team wanted you to feel for this slave that was a free man that was brought back into slavery. If he doesn't do a good job, if he doesn't make you so disgusted, then the message of the movie is not near as powerful.
Yeah.
You know, in Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, Christoph Waltz is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
He's an incredible Nazi that is so maniacal and so disgusting, and he's got this suave, he's got this charisma to him that, like, if it was done poorly, you wouldn't care as much for the Inglourious Bastards to kill the Nazis.
Yeah.
You wouldn't care as much, and so I think that it's so important that with especially like controversial villains, it has to be done so well.
Well, and I think to touch back on our original point is that you have to make them hateable. You can't give them human traits in the sense of, oh, I feel bad for Michael Fassbender's character. Right. Because then it starts to work. So, yeah, they have to play them so solidly. And I guess it kind of where you kind of want to like them in the sense that you want to be intrigued by hating them. Okay?
Right.
Like, it's this weird cycle of you like them to hate them.
If they're too nice, then you're like, that's not believable. That like,
exactly.
no one would. That person wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
but I also think that it's really important if you're doing like a controversial role where you're gonna say like the N-word or something like that. It's really important that you do it well. Otherwise, it's just gonna come across like really distasteful.
Well, absolutely.
You got to have confidence in what you're saying.
Right.
Like to show like if Christoph Waltz are playing a Nazi. And whenever he, as an actor, had to talk about something about the Jews, about how much he hated them or they deserve to die, if he eased back on those parts of his lines at all, it would give like this insincerity, and it would be almost cheesy, which in turn turns into almost a parody, which is almost making fun of it. So to be like Michael Fassbender's character and use the N-word or whatever, or Calvin Candy in Django, Leo had to hit that word hard, and he had to mean it, or at least act that he meant it. I hope.
All right, Leo, take a step back.
Calm down there, Leo.
Feels a little too real.
But you have to commit 110%, because if you don't, then it's like, oh well, I'm unsure, and then then it just snowballs into looking like a joke, and you're making light of a situation that obviously, if you're going to comment on slavery or Nazis or whatever, then you can't be lighthearted about it.
Okay. But hey, good talking. Not as many sidebars as I expected, but that was good. That was good talk.
We had that one under control.
Under control. Well,
wasn't quite as much like overlap like last time.
Yeah, there was a lot more respect.
A lot of just interrupting and like just us talking over.
Well, thanks for being under control with us. If you like the control.
What?
If you like what we do,
like the control.
You like the control.
Just keep listening.
Tuning in. Smash the like button.
Leave a review.
Keep listening to us. We now have an Instagram and Twitter, so you can follow us at quick_sidebar. And
we're official.
Yeah, send us ideas. What do you want us to talk about? Let us know.
Yeah.
Bradley, you were telling us about work today.
Oh yeah.
Work today.
So the other day, this girl comes into my work. I work at Starbucks, and she was sitting at the counter, and I was making her drink, and I just, was trying to be nice, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And she responds, "Great. I can't believe you remember me." And I'm like, ugh. So I keep my face, try not to give away, and I just say, "Yeah, how you been?"
Did your voice crack? Not that you did now, but I'm saying when it happened, did you kind of be like?
I think it might have a little bit.